The great debate: Apple stock, Microsoft stock, Google stock. Which one is better? I know a bunch of super investors that own Apple, a bunch that own Microsoft, and an absolute ton that own Google. But a lot of these investors bought these stocks years ago. Let's get an updated view on these stocks. 2023, which one do I think is better to own? I'm going to leave that at the end of the video, which stock I find the most attractive. But let's do a fundamental analysis of all of these stocks. We'll start with the business model. Apple's business model is so easy to understand. They sell technology products to users who, generally speaking, love these products. The iPhone, what a massive invention this was 15 years ago, whenever it was invented. But still, they're at the top of the smartphone game. 48% of their revenue comes from iPhones. They sell MacBooks, which is obviously the laptop computer. This is what I'm using right now. 8.3% of their revenue. iPad, I've got all three of these. iPad is 7% of their revenue. Then they have the wearable section, which is smartphones and all the other products, which accounts for 10% of their revenue. And they have their services section, which is iTunes, the App Store and whatnot, which accounts for 25% of their revenue. So that's Apple's business model in a nutshell. Pretty easy to understand. Google's is also pretty simple. They have Google Search, which makes up most of their revenue. And simply what happens here is advertisers pay Google to advertise their company and appear at the top of search results. So that accounts for 57% plus 11%, so about 68% of revenue. Network members, that's when Google AdSense is just put on different websites. So 68% of the revenue comes from advertising on Google. Then you got YouTube ads. YouTube, beautiful business model. You have content creators who make content for free. YouTube don't pay these content creators. Instead, they just give them a slice of the advertising revenue. So literally all YouTube has to do is maintain their software of YouTube, the site, and they get all of this advertising revenue. Beautiful business model. Then you got Google, Google Other, which is Google Play Store, their hardware products, and also weirdly enough is YouTube paid members comes under Google Other. That accounts for 10% of their revenue. Then you got Google Cloud, which is basically users paying Google for all of the technology that they have. So, one example would be users pay Google for storage. So Google has this hardware and software, and they allow users to store information on their hardware, but the users have to pay Google for it. And, there's a lot of other examples of cloud, but that's the basic one, which is storage. Finally, we got other bets, which is not that important since it only makes up 0.38% of their revenue. Now, this consists of fiber, aka access, which is internet and TV services. You got Verily, which is licensing and R&D services. And you also got Waymo, which is like self-driving cars, which I don't think that's going to be a massive thing, but let's see. Other bets is kind of these bets that Google have, which they hope is going to be 100x, 1000x investment, but there's also a good chance they're going to be worth nothing. Let's move on to Microsoft's business model. So they make $110 billion. I don't know when this was. It would have been a couple of years ago, but it's split into about 7-8 different categories. One is you have Office, which accounts for $16.6 billion of revenue, or 25.7%. And Office, we all know what Office does. They have Excel, they have Microsoft Word, they have PowerPoint, and users just pay a subscription to have these software. Next, you got Microsoft Azure, which is Microsoft's version of cloud. Again, you're using Microsoft's computing power for your needs, whether your needs be storage, you need to store some things, you need Microsoft software, you need Microsoft's analytics, you're a developer and you need their technology there. Again, you pay Microsoft for their technology. Then you have Windows, which accounts for 17.7% of revenue, or 19.5 billion. So Windows is just the operating system for computers. And then you have gaming, which Microsoft, they own Xbox. This accounts for 9.4% of revenue, or $10.4 billion. Weirdly enough, they also have Bing, which you would think Bing is like, who's on Bing these days? Weirdly enough, it does make a decent amount of revenue, $7 billion, 6.4%. And of course, Bing might be a bit of a game changer here because they have OpenAI and their artificial intelligence working with this search engine, which might make it, who knows, it might become in the future a dominant player in the search engine space with AI. And Microsoft, I like to call them the king of acquisitions. Here we've got an image of all of the major acquisitions purchased from Microsoft. They got LinkedIn, which has been struggling a bit recently. They've laid off employees, but LinkedIn they bought is worth $26.2 billion. They have GitHub, which is for developers. I don't actually fully understand that. It's for software developers. My brother understands that a lot more. They have Skype. And you can see all of the other acquisitions that Microsoft have made. They own Nokia. I didn't even know that. And obviously recently they purchased big into artificial intelligence, where they've kind of purchased OpenAI. And the recent news is they've purchased Activision Blizzard, which is a major purchase for them. So they're now getting big into the gaming industry too. So Microsoft, they're just everywhere. Their business model is in so many different sectors. And this is another good way of viewing Microsoft's business model, just so you can see which one's grown, which are the important sectors to them, the important parts of their business model. And as you can see, server products and their cloud services, which is Microsoft Azure, has been growing massively over the past sort of 4 years, 3 years. And this is becoming a big and important sector to Microsoft. It's grown from 32 billion to 67 billion in just 3 years' time. Office products and other cloud services, that's also growing too. So it's growing steadily. Office has been around for so long. They've transitioned that to more of a subscription base as opposed to just buying the hardware one-off. Then you got Windows, that's just basically hovering, probably, same as inflation, just growing by 2-3% every year. Gaming doing not bad with Xbox. LinkedIn, they have grown a bit, but they have also done a bit of struggling in 2023 where they've had to lay off employees. Search with Bing, again, grown from 2021 to 2022. Their enterprise GitHub has actually not gone anywhere. And yeah, same with others, just kind of grown a little bit here. So that's the growth with regards to Microsoft's business model. Okay, now we got a bit of a grasp for how they make money and understanding the business. Let's look at fundamentals. Let's look at numbers. So we'll start with the revenue. We'll start with Google's revenue. Revenue for Google has been growing very nicely over the past 5 years, from $136 billion to $282 billion. Microsoft is growing well too. They've gone from $125 billion to $198 billion, and that's just in 1 to 3 years. Apple. So all of these, with regards to total revenue, have been growing over the past 5 years. Apple, $265 billion, now $400 billion in just 1 year. That's crazy. But let's look at income, because revenue is what we make in total, but we don't keep revenue. What we keep is profit. So Google's profit has gone from $30 billion to $60 billion. Microsoft, $39 billion to $72 billion. So both of those have almost doubled, kind of similar in terms of growth. Apple from $60 billion to $90 billion. Again, almost doubled. So all of them have grown both revenue and profit pretty well over the past 4 years. Now let's look at return on assets just to see, which is the most effective business to own. So look at Apple. Apple makes a 21% return on assets. Microsoft a 14%, and Google is 13%. So in terms of total assets, Google makes a 13% return on it, 13% profit. Microsoft 14%, and Apple 21%. Very good business, Apple. That's why Warren Buffett loves it. And of course, because of other reasons like the moats. And he bought it 5 years ago, so it was selling for a great price. Now let's take a look at debt. So Apple does have quite a bit of debt on their hands. Total liabilities to total assets is 85%. So they have a lot of liabilities. Microsoft is 50%, which is a lot more manageable. And Google is 30%, which is the best out of all of them. Like the best. Now we're going to look at price, which is price compared to earnings. Microsoft has a 30 PE ratio, Apple a 27, and Google a 22. So Google is the cheapest out of all three of these stocks. They're the cheapest, and they have the less debt on their books. But also, some people say, no, don't look at earnings. You need to look at free cash flow, because free cash flow can't be manipulated. While Google, again, is the cheapest on these as well. Microsoft has a very high price or market cap, price to free cash flow of 51. Apple is 30, and Google, once again, is the cheapest, which is 25. So in terms of price, Google's selling for the cheapest. In terms of liabilities or debt, Google has the best on their books. In terms of effectiveness of the business, Apple wins over here. And in terms of revenue growth, they're all pretty even. I think Apple was the slowest, and Microsoft and Google were among the best. Which one was better in income growth? It was Google. So Google has had the most income growth over the past 4 years. The only thing that investors are worried about is this recent year where Google slipped in terms of income, 76 billion to 60 billion. So I just want to do a bit of a summary of positives and negatives of each business. Apple, what are the positives? Apple, they got their massive technology moat and customer moat. Customers love the iPhone. They love their products. They would hate to switch from an iPhone to an Android. Do you know how annoying that would be? So that's so good for Apple to have, because they have these customers who love their products and just want to keep buying their products, and they can keep making profit off it. And that's why they have such great consistent cash flow, and it's so good to be a business owner of Apple. You think about the negatives, they are pretty pricey. They are the biggest company in the world. And you know what they say, sometimes the higher you get, the bigger you get, the more you have to fall. So that's a bit of a problem with Apple. Let's think about Microsoft. Microsoft, they got a smart leader, Satya Nadella, really smart, really onto it. And they have those high margins. They're a very high margin business. It's around 30% margins that they make on revenue, which is really good. Some of the negatives with Microsoft, you might say that they might be a little bit over diversified with so many big businesses in so many different industries. How can they maintain the advantage in these very competitive industries when they have their hands in so many different pies? That's going to be a struggle for Microsoft in the future. And then again, you got the law of big numbers. They're such a big company, so it's going to be a lot harder for them to double and make those 5x, 10x type returns. Then you got Google. Google, what are the positives of Google? The business model. They got the creators who are making all of the content, all of these amazing content. All Google has to do is just maintain their websites, and they get all of this advertising revenue. It's such a passive way of making income. So they really do have this beautiful business model, and they're selling for a cheap price, and they got low amounts of debt on their hands. What are the potential negatives? Well, you got the law of big numbers. They're such a big company as well. So they are still harder to double, but not as hard to double as something like Microsoft and Apple. Another potential negative is they rely a lot on advertising, which is a bit of a problem, because if the economy turns bad, what's the thing that companies are going to cut out of their budgets? Advertising. So they are very reliant on the economy's strength. Lastly, let's look at management. Now, I don't really have any unique insight here. Tim Cook, Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai. Sundar Pichai is Google, Satya Nadella is Microsoft, and Tim Cook is Apple. They're all competent, they're all smart, but none of them are Elon Musk. None of them are big outliers. For me, the best out of all of these is Satya Nadella, just because he's so smart and he's so onto it business-wise. So if I had to pick one, I would pick Satya Nadella, but none of them are Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. And if you want to get to know the management better and what style you like, you just have to listen to the earnings calls yourselves. But if I had to pick a favorite out of the three stocks, for me, it's no question. I like Google the most. They're the cheapest. I like their business model the best, which is such a passive way of making money. And they've got this moat where everyone, we all Google things. Everyone says, they don't say, let's internet search something. They say Google. Everyone uses Google. Then they own YouTube, which create such amazing content online, and they don't have to make the content themselves or do what Netflix does, which is spend billions and billions of dollars to think of ideas and film everything. No, creators do that for them for free, and then they just make advertising revenue or paid memberships. So it's beautiful business model. It's pretty easy to understand. I like the cheap price. I like how much they've grown by recently. And that's why I like Google the most out of all three of these stocks. And yes, there is a very good chance that I might be buying Google. I just want to compare it to a few more stocks. Another business that I like is Amazon. So I want to compare it to Amazon. And yes, I might be a stockholder of Google soon, but let's see. Let's play it by ear a bit and do a bit more research.